America is often seen as a land of opportunity, a country built on freedom, success, and the promise of a better life. But over the past decade, that image has started to crack. From rising costs and broken systems to growing inequality and frustration, more and more Americans feel like they're being left behind. And it's not hard to see why. For many, the American dream isn't just slipping away, it's already out of reach. As the richest country in the world, people from all over the globe still dream of moving to America. However, with over 60% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck and many others drowning in debt, more are dreaming of getting out. Skyrocketing rents, crippling healthcare costs, a broken work culture, and growing inequality are turning daily life into a struggle. So why is life in the richest country on earth getting harder every year?
U.S. government debt is now the highest in history. The last time U.S. debt was this much was during World War II.
We also have a shortage of homes to buy, and the people who are buying homes, they're facing a market where homes are much more expensive than they've been in history.
I'm realizing that companies outside of the United States actually care about you as a full person.
Over the past decade, many Americans have watched nearly every part of life become harder to afford. Jobs that once felt secure are now uncertain, and each paycheck seems to stretch less and less. Sound familiar? It should, because it's happening across the country. And while rising living costs are a global issue, America's version of the crisis comes with its own twist. Take housing, for example. Incomes in the U.S. haven't kept up with the surge in home prices. Since 2000, wages have grown slowly, while housing costs in many cities have skyrocketed. For millions of Americans, owning a home is no longer a realistic goal. This shift has hit younger generations the hardest. Middle-aged millennials, now in their 30s and 40s, are seeing the dream of home ownership slip away. In fact, their ownership rates have dropped by more than 10% in recent years, and the gap continues to widen, alongside the worrying fact that over 60% of the population is now living paycheck to paycheck and unable to save. 1 in 4 Americans are burdened by medical debt, a heavy price for what should be a fundamental right to health care.
In the United States, more than half of all the bills in collection right now are medical bills. That means debt collectors have gotten involved. According to Forbes, the United States spends more on healthcare than other wealthy nations, but ranks last in outcomes. And medical debt is the leading cause of personal bankruptcy in the U.S.
If we dig deeper into the housing stats, home ownership rates have plummeted among millennials and Generation Z, with many viewing the American dream as an elusive fantasy rather than an attainable goal. In 2023, just over a quarter, 26.3% of adult Gen Zers in the U.S. owned a home. In the UK, approximately 39% of 25 to 34-year-olds in the UK own their homes. While both countries are seeing young people struggle to make enough money to afford a home, in the U.S., 7 in 10 workers feel they are not being paid enough to get by. Wages have failed to keep pace with inflation over 4 decades, leaving countless families grappling with a harsh economic reality that feels increasingly distant from the dream that once defined the nation. All of this makes perfect sense when you take into consideration the nation's issue with cost of living. In March 2024, CNN Business stated that the American dream is under siege, noting that from the historically unaffordable housing market and budget-breaking daycare rates to high car prices, the United States has a cost of living problem that's been many years in the making. Speaking to many U.S. citizens across the nation, they found that many feel that living in the U.S. is becoming impossible. According to research from the Intercontinental Exchange, by February 2024, it took about 34% of the median household's monthly income to cover the principal and interest payments on a median-priced home. For those looking to buy their first home, things are getting tricky to say the least. As of recent years, the average price of a home has surpassed $400,000, a staggering figure that highlights the growing divide between wages and housing affordability. While home ownership once symbolized stability and success, the reality today is that many prospective buyers find themselves priced out of the market, struggling to save for down payments amid soaring costs. For families with children, there's the added worry of being able to afford childcare. According to Care.com, the weekly price of daycare for a toddler surged 9% in 2023, whilst the rate for infants spiked 13%. Furthermore, renting has become unaffordable in major cities across the United States, with many urban centers witnessing rental prices that outpace local wages, leaving countless individuals and families in a tough spot.
So we have not been building enough housing over the past decade to keep up with the rate of population growth. In
cities where the cost of living is already high, the burden of rent can eat up an overwhelming portion of one's income, forcing many to make impossible choices between living arrangements and other necessities. Since the pandemic, the cost of living has gotten even worse. Prices for groceries, gas, and utilities have gone up a ton, while making it even harder for people to afford everyday life. In February 2025, BBC News reported that U.S. inflation increased by more than expected in January, as higher ag and energy prices helped to push up the cost of living for Americans. Inflation rose to 3% in January, its highest rate for 6 months, and above the 2.9% expected by economists, and things aren't looking to improve anytime soon. According to CBS News, inflation is set to rise by 2.5% in 2025, and another key gauge that strips out volatile food and energy costs is projected to reach 2.7%, up from 2.5% from an earlier forecast. So it's safe to say that for many Americans, the days of easily covering everyday costs are long gone. Now, just getting by has become more expensive than ever, and without strong support systems like affordable housing or solid social programs, people who are already struggling are often left on their own, stuck in a tough cycle of financial stress that feels impossible to escape. And as if the cost of living crisis wasn't challenging enough, the American healthcare system continues to struggle and worsen the financial burdens faced by many. Unlike most developed nations, the U.S. lacks universal healthcare, leaving millions reliant on private insurance plans that often fall short in protecting against absurd medical expenses. Medical bankruptcy has become a common tragedy, with over 500,000 cases reported each year as families are crushed under the weight of unexpected healthcare costs. Even those fortunate enough to have insurance find themselves navigating a minefield of high deductibles and surprise bills that can skyrocket their out-of-pocket expenses, further complicating their financial well-being. Alarmingly, it was also reported in 2024 that 1 in 4 adults stated how over the course of 12 months they had skipped or postponed getting health care they needed because of the costs. Also, 6 in 10 uninsured adults, 61%, said they went without needed care because of the cost. And according to KFF, the high cost of prescription drugs prevents some people from filling prescriptions altogether. In the U.S., the average annual out-of-pocket prescription drug expenditure for all adults is around $177, but it's significantly higher for those aged 65 and older, reaching $456 for those aged 65 to 79. If you compare that to the UK, for example, it's clear how expensive it is. In the UK, the cost of a prescription is a flat rate of £9.90 or $12.62. This harsh reality shows how broken the US healthcare system really is. It's not just expensive, it's unfair. Many people are forced to choose between staying healthy and staying financially stable. The rising cost of living in the U.S. has, in many ways, become a catalyst for younger generations to pursue higher education and seek out high-paying jobs as a means of achieving financial stability. However, this pursuit comes at a steep price, literally. College tuition in the U.S. has skyrocketed. The nation has $1.77 trillion in student debt, and the average federal student loan debt per person is over $37,000, according to the Education Data Initiative. Private institutions often charge between $60,000 and $80,000 per year, which is far out of reach for many. People often say education is the key to a better life, but for many graduates, that's not how it turns out. Even with a degree, it's common to struggle finding a good job in the field they studied. In fact, a significant number of graduates are left underemployed or working at positions that don't utilize their skills or justify the costs of their education. According to Statista, by May 2024, around 4.5% of recent college graduates were unemployed in the United States. Moreover, the ongoing debates surrounding student loan forgiveness have left millions of borrowers in a frustrating limbo, unsure of their financial futures amid shifting policies and promises. This complicated landscape creates a paradox where the very tools intended to facilitate advancement, education, and professional qualifications become sources of stress and financial strain. Even for those students fortunate enough to land their desired jobs in this challenging economy, the reality of the American work culture often leaves much to be desired. The U.S. stands alone among wealthy nations in lacking guaranteed paid vacation, breeding an environment where taking time off can feel more like a luxury than a right. The average American worker is lucky to receive 10 vacation days per year, which is egregiously low compared to many other countries where longer breaks are standard and celebrated. As of 2025, the average vacation time for civilian and private industry employees is 11 days. However, this doesn't typically come into effect until 1 year of service. Coupled with the norm of 40 to 60-hour work weeks, this relentless grind fosters a hustle culture that glorifies overwork and perpetuates the idea that personal worth is tied to productivity. While ambition and dedication are admirable qualities, this mentality can lead to widespread mental health issues and significant burnout, as workers are left to navigate mounting pressures in both their personal and professional lives. And rising mental health issues is something the U.S. is suffering with already. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, it's estimated that more than 1 in 5 U.S. adults live with a mental illness. This takes us back to the expensive, and some would say failing, healthcare system. Research has shown that within 2 years of losing access to healthcare, those with a history of mental illness are more likely to be incarcerated. Also, the presence of any mental health disorder is associated with 4 to 5 times increased risk of crime outcomes. But most Americans are well aware of the nation's growing crime problems anyway, and it is not just mental health issues that are worsening them. As the struggles of daily life mount, crime in the U.S. appears to be worsening each year, particularly concerning safety and gun violence, further eroding the sense of security that many Americans once took for granted. Even if there were an assault weapons ban that went into effect tomorrow, there's still probably about 20 million AR-15 style rifles in the United States. So in 2023 alone, there were over 600 mass shootings, a staggering statistic that highlights a disturbing trend in a country renowned for its gun culture. The prevalence of firearms is astounding, with an average of 120 guns per 100 residents, more than any other nation in the world. This reality has led to the jarring normalization of active shooter drills in schools, a haunting reminder for students and educators alike of the potential dangers in spaces that should be safe. As a result, many Americans increasingly feel uneasy, if not outright fearful, in public spaces where the threat of violence looms large. As if worries about gun violence and crime weren't enough, homelessness has become a major issue in many U.S. cities, making people feel even less safe. On any given night, hundreds of thousands of Americans are without a stable place to live. In January 2024, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, reported that 771,480 people experienced homelessness in the United States on a single night, an 18% increase from 2023. This had led to the emergence of tent cities in urban centers like Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle, and New York. These homeless encampments are a clear sign of the growing poverty problem, showing a harsh contrast between extreme wealth and the everyday struggle many people face. It's not uncommon to see Lamborghinis parked just blocks away from makeshift shelters, underscoring the major wealth gap that permeates our society. Many individuals experiencing homelessness are not simply facing misfortune. A significant number work full-time jobs yet still find themselves unable to afford basic housing. And while not all homeless people resort to crime, many do. Los Angeles Police Department crime data from 2018 to 2021 shows that homeless individuals, while only 1% of the population, are suspects in 6 to 8% of all crimes and 11 to 15% of violent crimes. So, with all of this in mind, is it any wonder that there has been a major decline in public trust? According to Pew Research Center, public trust in government remains low, as it has for much of the 21st century. They reported that only 2 in 10 Americans say they trust the government. This crisis of confidence is mirrored in citizens' perceptions of the media and the healthcare system, both of which also suffer from diminishing trust. Politics in the U.S. feels more divided than ever. The growing split between sides has led to more misinformation and a sense that things just aren't working. Protests have become a regular sight as people speak out about their frustrations, but even those movements often break apart over different beliefs, making the divisions even deeper. As trust fades and divisions grow, many Americans are starting to feel like their country is becoming more unstable. Working together and having honest conversations is getting harder as anger and fear take over. This feeling of instability only adds to the many challenges Americans are already dealing with. People are not just facing personal struggles, they're also trying to get by in a country that feels more uncertain and divided than ever. With that, many people are leaving the so-called land of opportunity in search of greener pastures, and if they're not leaving just yet, many are planning on it. In September 2024, a survey found that 25% of Gen Z and millennials are actively planning on leaving the U.S. to live abroad within the next 5 years. The vast majority, 87%, want to escape the corporate world and become digital nomads to support themselves while living abroad. 51% attributed their plans to leave due to the cost of living in the U.S. 36% attributed it to the U.S. economy. 34% attributed it to U.S. politics, and 24% to gun violence. And it's not just the younger generation that are leaving. In 2022, CNN reported that the U.S. State Department estimates that 9 million Americans are living abroad. Following President Donald Trump's decisive victory, search activity related to immigration skyrocketed by 1,514% in early 2025. So there's no doubt that America is still a place of innovation, opportunity, and cultural influence. However, the cracks in the system are growing wider, and more people are falling through. For millions, the dream feels out of reach, and unless real change happens soon, the country once seen as the ultimate destination might become the one people are trying to leave the most. What about why the U.S. hasn't annexed Canada yet?